In my 35 years on the bench in Providence, Rhode Island, I've seen tough men try to act tougher than consequences. I've seen people joke when they're scared, and I've seen people smile when they're ashamed. But one morning, a sheriff walked into my courtroom and mocked me like the law was a punchline. He laughed. He looked around like he had fans in the gallery, and he treated my court like it was an inconvenience on his schedule. Let me tell you something, my friends. Moments later, he wasn't laughing anymore. He was staring at a piece of paper that made him go quiet. And he learned the hard way that respect isn't optional. If this touches your heart, leave a comment right now and tell me if you believe people in power should be held to a higher standard, and subscribe to see more stories from my courtroom, because what happened next shook the whole room. That day started ordinary. That's the funny thing about extraordinary moments. They often begin like any other Tuesday in municipal court. The gallery was full of everyday people. A father in work boots holding a crumpled ticket. A young woman whispering to her grandmother, trying to calm her. A teenager staring at the floor, scared of what might happen. You could hear the light hum from the ceiling, the shuffle of papers, the soft murmur of people trying not to speak too loudly. Inspector Quinn stood where he always stands, steady and respectful. I've always had affection for him because he treats people with dignity. He doesn't see defendants, he sees human beings. And when someone walks in with trouble on their shoulders, Quinn's presence keeps the room from tipping into chaos. He gave me a look that morning, not dramatic, just a glance that said, "Judge, pay attention." Then he called, "Sheriff Raymond Keller." The word sheriff moved through the room like a breeze that makes everyone turn their head. People know that title. They know the authority behind it. And they also know the question that comes with it. Will the law apply the same way today? Sheriff Keller walked up like he owned the building. He was tall, broad, with that confident stride you see in men who command other men. His uniform was immaculate. The badge and patches were bright. He carried his hat like it was part of a show. And his face had that grin that tells you he's not here for humility. He stopped at the podium and looked out at the gallery like he was waiting for a reaction. Then he looked at me and chuckled. "Morning, Judge," he said, like we were old buddies at a diner. I kept my voice calm. "Good morning, Sheriff." He leaned forward and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "This is about a couple tickets, right? I'm going to be honest, Judge. I thought you'd have bigger fish to fry than me." A few people in the gallery shifted. One woman's eyebrows raised as if to say, "Did he just say that?" Inspector Quinn's jaw tightened just slightly. The prosecutor looked down at his file and then back up, like he already knew this was about to turn. I looked down at the paperwork. On the surface, it was municipal, multiple unpaid citations and a failure to appear. But the details mattered. Parking in a marked fire lane, speeding in a school zone, and the one that made my stomach tighten, a handicapped space violation without a placard outside a medical supply store. Total fines had grown to $1,460 with penalties, the kind of amount that can crush an ordinary family. I looked up and said, "Sheriff Keller, do you understand why you're here?" He laughed again. "Because somebody got offended I didn't pay fast enough." I nodded slowly. "Let me ask you something. When you stop a citizen and they say, 'Sheriff, somebody got offended I didn't pay fast enough,' what do you tell them?" He shrugged. "I tell them, 'Pay your fines.'" I leaned forward. "So you understand the rule?" He smirked. "Sure, but I'm the sheriff. I'm busy. I'm not some kid forgetting a meter." That's the moment where you can feel the room split. Some people get angry, some people get discouraged because they're thinking about their own lives, how they came to court on their day off, how they borrowed money to pay, how they were scared. And here's a man in power acting like the whole thing is a joke. Let me tell you something, my friends. The law doesn't need a judge to be loud. The law needs a judge to be fair. And fairness begins with the same standard for every person, whether they wear a uniform or a hoodie. Before I tell you what I found in his file that stopped his laughter cold, hit that like button if you believe the law should apply to everyone. And subscribe to see more stories from my courtroom, because this is where ego met reality. I said, "We're going to go one citation at a time." He sighed like he was doing me a favor. "All right, let's do it." I held up the first citation. "Speeding, 47 and a 20, school zone, time 3:10 p.m. He waved his hand. "Judge, come on. I drive that road all the time." "All the time," I repeated. "Near children." He laughed. "I'm trained. I can handle a vehicle." I looked him in the eye. "Let me ask you something. Are the children trained?" He blinked. "Are the kids trained to predict what a trained sheriff will do?" I asked. "Or do they rely on the speed limit to protect them?" His smile tightened. He didn't answer. I moved to the second citation. "Fire lane, outside the Providence Community Health Clinic. Vehicle unattended for 29 minutes. He chuckled. "Fire lane. Nobody was on fire, Judge." A few people in the gallery murmured. Someone shook their head. That was a cruel joke to people who've watched ambulances fight for space. I stayed calm. The fire lane isn't for fires only, it's for access, it's for emergencies, it's for seconds that save lives. He shrugged. Okay, fine, I'll pay it. What's the grand total? You want me to pull out my checkbook right now? He laughed like he thought he was in control again. I looked down at the file and saw the third item. Handicapped space, no placard, medical supply store. Attached, complaint, witness, photo. That's when I felt the air change, and that's when I saw something that told me this wasn't just a ticket. This was a lesson. I looked up and asked, Sheriff Keller, do you know a woman named Maria Bellini? His grin faded a little. No. I nodded. All right. I turned the document around so I could read it clearly. It was handwritten, an older hand. The ink looked pressed hard into the paper, the way people write when they're emotional. I said, This is a complaint from Maria Bellini, age 79. The sheriff rolled his eyes slightly, like he was waiting for a dramatic story. I began reading. She states that on March 22nd at 10:14 a.m., she arrived at Bellini Medical Supply to pick up oxygen tubing and a walker attachment for her husband, Antonio Bellini. She states her husband has chronic lung disease and is on oxygen. She states the accessible space closest to the entrance was occupied by a marked county vehicle. She states the driver was in uniform. She states the name patch read Keller. I looked up. Sheriff Keller's face changed just a touch. Still confident, but the laugh was quieter now. I continued. She states she waited in her car for several minutes, assuming the driver would return. She states she then approached the vehicle and asked if someone could move it. She states the sheriff returned from inside the store, laughed, and said, quote, Ma'am, you've got legs. Use them. The gallery went silent. Not a dramatic silence, an uncomfortable silence. I stopped reading and looked at him. Did you say that? He scoffed. Judge, people exaggerate. I held up another sheet. There's a witness statement from the store clerk, and there's a photograph of the vehicle in the handicapped space with the plate visible. His throat moved like he swallowed. The grin was almost gone now. Before I tell you what happened next, the part that took his mocking tone and turned it into pure shock, leave a comment right now. What should happen when someone in power humiliates an elderly person? And share this video if you believe dignity is not optional. I turned to the last attachment, a medical note. Not long, one paragraph. It was from a respiratory therapist. I read the name at the top and felt my stomach drop. Antonio Bellini. I looked up at Sheriff Keller and asked gently, Sheriff, do you know who Antonio Bellini is? He frowned. No. I nodded. Antonio Bellini is Maria Bellini's husband. He shrugged again, trying to act unaffected. I read the note. It states that after the incident on March 22nd, Mr. Bellini experienced a severe episode of shortness of breath while walking from a distant parking spot to the store entrance. It states he required emergency treatment later that day. I paused. Then I read the last sentence. It states that Mr. Bellini passed away 2 days later. The room froze. Even I had to pause, because when death enters a municipal case, everything changes. You can't treat it like paperwork anymore. I looked up at Sheriff Keller, and that's when he was shocked. His mouth opened slightly, his eyes widened, his body leaned back as if the words pushed him away. He whispered, No. I said, Yes. He shook his head, almost like a child denying something scary. That can't be. I held the note up. It's signed and dated by a medical professional. It's in the file. His face drained of color. His hands gripped the podium. Seconds ago, he was joking about fires and fish to fry. Now he couldn't even breathe smoothly. If you're feeling this moment, hit that like button if you believe small acts of disrespect can create big consequences, and subscribe to see more stories from my courtroom, because what happened next is where I had to decide what justice really meant. Sheriff Keller's voice cracked. Judge, I didn't know. I didn't know the man died. I leaned forward. Did you know he was on oxygen? He hesitated. Then he whispered, I saw the tank in the car. I said softly but firmly, And you still laughed? His eyes filled with tears he didn't expect. He tried to blink them away, but they came anyway. He whispered, I was in a bad mood. I nodded. A bad mood doesn't give you permission to be cruel. He started breathing faster, the panic of a man realizing he's not in control anymore. He said, Judge, please. I didn't mean. I held up my hand. We're not talking about what you meant. We're talking about what you did. He went quiet, not dramatic quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a person realizes the room isn't impressed by his title anymore. He looked back toward the gallery, and for the first time, he saw them, not as an audience, but as people, and he saw their faces, the disappointment, the anger, the pain. Then he looked back at me and whispered, "What am I going to do?" I took a slow breath. I thought about my father, Italian immigrant, worked hard, never asked for special treatment. He used to say, "Francesco, the strongest man is the one who can apologize without excuses." I said, "You're going to take responsibility. Before I tell you my ruling, leave a comment. Would you punish him harshly, or would you create consequences that force real change? Tell me what you would do." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the county requests full fines and a referral to the Sheriff's Department for internal review due to the conduct alleged." Inspector Quinn gave me a look that said, "Judge, the public trust is on the line." I nodded. "I understand." Then I looked at Sheriff Keller. "Here's what I'm going to do. First," I said, "you will pay every dollar of the fines. No reduction, no special treatment. $1,460. He nodded quickly, tears in his eyes. "Yes." "Second," I continued, "your behavior toward Mrs. Bellini is unacceptable. This court cannot erase what happened to her husband, but this court can make sure you understand the human cost of disrespect." He swallowed hard. "I'm ordering 100 hours of community service," I said, "at a senior center and with a mobility assistance program, helping elderly residents to appointments, helping them with walkers, learning what it means to move through the world when every step hurts." He nodded. "And," I said, "you will write a handwritten apology letter to Mrs. Bellini. You will not blame stress. You will not blame your schedule. You will not blame the job. You will acknowledge what you said and why it was wrong." He whispered, "Yes." And I added, "This matter will be referred for internal review. That is not revenge. That is accountability. You represent the law. Your department needs to know how you behave when you think you're untouchable." His eyes filled again. He nodded. I leaned forward and said, "Sheriff Keller, let me tell you something. A uniform is not a license to be rude. It is a promise to be better than your worst day. That's a lesson I wish every public servant would remember." I added, "And here's another truth. If you can't show compassion to the vulnerable, you don't deserve authority over them." He broke down quietly. "Judge, I'm sorry." I nodded. "Sorry is the beginning. Change is the proof." I looked at him and said, "What am I going to do with you?" A small nervous laugh moved through the gallery, but it died quickly. This wasn't funny anymore. "I'm going to do what I always try to do," I said. "Hold you accountable and still leave you a door to become better." Then I said, "Take care of yourself." He whispered, "God bless you." I replied, "God bless you too." If this story touched your heart, hit that like button if you believe consequences should teach, not just punish. Subscribe to see more stories from my courtroom, because the follow-up is where you find out if someone truly changed or just acted sorry. 2 months later, Sheriff Keller returned to court. He looked different, not because his uniform changed, because his face did. No swagger, no jokes. His eyes looked tired in an honest way. Inspector Quinn handed me the documentation. Fine paid. Community service hours completed. Letter delivered. Counselor session attendance for anger management, which he voluntarily added. I asked, "Did you meet Mrs. Bellini?" He swallowed. "Yes, Judge," she agreed. "What happened?" I asked. He took a breath. "She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just looked at me and said, 'My husband was a gentleman. He didn't deserve to be laughed at.'" His voice cracked. "And then she said, 'If you're truly sorry, don't be sorry for me. Be better for the next old woman who meets you.'" I felt my throat tighten. Because that is grace, not forgetting, but choosing to turn pain into wisdom. I said to him, "What did you learn?" He looked up. "I learned that I've been hiding behind my badge. I learned I thought respect was something I could demand. I was wrong. Respect is something you earn by how you treat people who can't fight you back." The gallery was quiet again. Different quiet. Reflective quiet. I nodded. "That's the lesson." I closed the case. "This matter is resolved in this court." As he stepped away, he looked back and said, "Judge, thank you for not just fining me. Thank you for making me face what I did." I said, "Remember it and live it." After court, I sat alone for a moment and thought about what the public wants from justice. People want fairness. They want accountability. They want to know the powerful can't laugh their way out of harm. But I've been doing this for 35 years, and I'll tell you what I want. I want a courtroom to be a place where the truth is spoken, where consequences have meaning, and where people still have a chance to change. My father taught me that dignity is everything. He came from Italy with nothing, but he had dignity. He would rather suffer quietly than take something he didn't earn. And he taught me that the way you treat strangers is the way you'll eventually treat your own family if you're not careful. So let me tell you something, my friends. If you're watching this and you're tempted to mock someone because they move slowly, because they're weak, because they're old, stop. You're looking at your future. And the way you treat the vulnerable is the truth about who you are. Before I go, subscribe to see more stories from my courtroom. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done? God bless you. Take care of yourself. But nothing prepared me for what walked into my courtroom next.